Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is Forias, and this is my co-host, Mystere. So, Mystere, how are you going today?
I am very well for IS. Happy New Year.
Yes. Happy New Year to you as well, Mystere.
Thank you very much.
And you know what? 2024 has been such a huge year.
It has.
Probably saying a lot has happened is probably an understatement. But,
Just a little.
But like, I thought it would be a great idea to do, or at least cover the topic of the revolutionary lessons from 2024. Like, what was the biggest lessons we learned? And,
Yeah.
what are our goals for 2025? So,
Broad
maybe,
discussion topic. My God.
well,
But
yes.
but important. Important
Yeah,
nonetheless.
So, like, okay, let's start at the start. Like, what would you say is your biggest lesson that you've learned in 2024?
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough question. I have to turn to the US, the citadel of, modern capitalism. And like whatever's going on there reverberates throughout the world, obviously. So, you can't go past the US presidential election. No brainer. Like it seemed like the entire year was a ramp up towards that one day in November. I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
It seemed like so much of the year was wasted focusing on that, and the craziness of the American system and its political system. But I would say the the American election has taught us a lot, about where people are at the moment. But it was a year full of like elections, and like it would seem that there is a dramatic shift to right-wing politics across like Europe and America. It seems like there's trouble in Canada as well in terms of Trudeau and I guess you would call it lefties in their political system. Like you saw the same thing kind of in New Zealand as well. They had a shift to the right. So like you're seeing in Western liberal democracies a sharp and a definite turn to the right to solve the problems of the current system, which is basically the social welfare state that was granted to us, in the 50s after the World Wars, where people were kind of promised that that was enough and we're going to do better from now on. That sort of infrastructure and the societies that have been set up, the social welfare state, is absolutely decaying, and it's causing a lot of people stress and confusion as it slowly breaks apart, thanks to the erosion of decades of neoliberal agenda. And now we are seeing people in desperation turn to basically right-wing populists, I would say, strong men and women, to kind of solve their problems. And like it's always, migrants and other people's problems that have caused people issues on home soil. And so these right-wing populists seem to have the answers because they just attack, evil others. It's never us. It's the people that are coming in here and destroying our culture and our way of life. And no one's really pointing to the absolute elephant in the room, which is just the capitalist mode of production. This is just what it does. You get some wins on the board, and then, after a couple of generations, not even, like it's all gone again. And so like people are experiencing higher cost of living than they're used to. So inflationary changes that like just haven't been seen for a long time. Living standards are dropping, health issues are arising that we haven't seen. Like capitalism kind of promised an upwards and forever trajectory, and we're starting to see that, we might not have the same stuff that our grandparents had or our parents had. We might not even have the same life expectancy. and standard of living that they had. And like this myth that it's always just capitalism just keeps on going up, baby, is like, is slapping people in the face, and they're turning in desperation to easy answers, which is what the right wing does. It offers to blame other people and vent people's anger in a certain direction. So like, I think the revolutionary lesson then in saying all of that would be that we need to be conscious of what is actually happening politically, which is people are looking to populist leaders and looking to place blame on someone for all of the trials and tribulations that they face in the modern economy. And we should not be looking to fight fire with fire, but looking to use that energy, use that rage and enthusiasm to our advantage. And that would be my revolutionary lesson for 2024. I don't look at kind of Trump's victory as some type of expression that people just love Trump, but more that they are angry with the system and they are unable to vent their rage in any meaningful way. And so it is our job to make sure that we mobilize people and at least point them in the right direction, if not take them along for the ride, if you know what I mean. Which is a great lesson from Lenin, I think. He, in his book, which you put me onto, FRIS, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, speaks very, very strongly and romantically, I would say, about being a strategic revolutionary as opposed to being an infantile left-wing communist who's dogmatic and says, no, we can't ally with this person and we can't strategically do this because it doesn't align with our values. He's just like, no, play the game that's in front of you, get whatever advantage you need to, and fulfill your mission. And so, like, I think there's a lot to be said from that. And, like I said, reading the current political landscape.
But also, like, I guess you've probably focused on the more conservative side of things, or at least the way the pendulum is flung to the right.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to zone in on what's happening on the left, though, because I've pitched this on the Discord. Like, some people have heard this view on the hot the bold or hot topic channel on there.
Yeah.
But the seemingly left, or at least the more left-leaning liberal side of things, which was the Democrats.
Yeah.
A lot of their campaign was based on vibes. It was based on the brat summer. I especially liked Jonathan Pye's analysis, where it's like, what the hell were even her policies? I'm sure the Democrats and her had policies. Yeah. But the thing, though, is how Trump's advantages were like, oh, I'm just going to say this outrageous thing. You're going to focus on that. Say this outrageous things. You're going to focus on that. And basically starve my opposition of all of the screen time because everyone's focusing on me.
Yeah.
Which is, again, that right populist strongman image that even Dutton's trying to emulate here. And the bold take I at least took in the Discord was, wait a second, I'm seeing a lot of similarities with how Harris and the Democrats handled the 2024 election and what happened with the referendum in 2022.
Okay.
And there were a lot of questions about how the the voice of parliament was going to work, and quite frankly there was a lot of reasonable questions, and what ended up happening, especially when there was a lot of confusion as to what was happening with the voice of parliament. It seems like at least the upper echelons of the Yes campaign, they kind of were like, "Oh, hey, we've adopted the John Farnham, "You're the Voice" song, and yeah, Yes campaign," and then things kind of just went out of control, and
Mm,
they focused again much more on vibes, and
yeah,
then suddenly everything capitulated. Like
yeah,
obviously. There was a proper 372 pamphlet as to how the voice of Parliament would work, but I think the lesson, at least for the left, is guys, we gotta work on our communication
yeah,
because
yeah,
like as much as I hate if you don't know vote no it like as much as I hate that slogan, it was a very simple message.
yeah,
It
yeah,
told you if you have any doubts, then just vote for our way.
yeah,
And simple message compared to oh, in this
mm,
circumstance you do this, and in this circumstance you do that.
yeah,
That sort of clear messaging is always going to win out, regardless on whether you think your argument is right or you're just focusing things on vibes. Because
yeah.
just thinking that you're right and thinking that you're doing the right thing isn't going to persuade people to
Yes.
follow your message.
That's right, especially with the propaganda machine designed in the way that it is, um, where like they have this kind of false balance where they try to depict both sides and stuff like that, where like, there should be an actual critical analysis of what's going on, where the media should actually present the real picture. And then, if you want to get in talking like commentators from each side, then you can do that instead of like pretending just to have balanced media by just giving somebody a voice to say something on a topic, whether they've got any substance to speak about, apart from good, just simply good messaging. And like, I read an interesting book last year called Hidden Where It Hurts. And this is by a political strategist who works for the Democrats in America.
Mm.
And basically, as the title suggests, kind of Hidden Where It Hurts is about like using the Republican strategies on the Republicans. So you had this strategy focus, which was more on like talking about like if the Republicans have a catchy line, then make your own catchy line to defeat it, kind of thing, as opposed to being like, no, we have policies, like kind of thing, and talking about policies, because as soon as they say their catchy line as an attack to you, and you're on the defense explaining how your policy gets around that or is better than that,
Yeah.
like you're on the defense, you've already lost. So their strategy this time was like kind of, oh, let's bring our own style of these catchy sayings and stuff like that to the table. And they failed. They can't beat the Republicans at their own game, it would seem. And so like, having good messaging in the face of people that have equally good or better messaging and have been perfecting it for longer is just, it wasn't the right strategy. And it has failed in other instances, like you have explained. So, like, simply fighting fire with fire, I don't think is going to do the trick in the modern political game. The way to mobilize the working class or to mobilize working people is to give them something real that they can think about. And like, all of the evidence was there in 2024, like I explained at the start. Like, the evidence was basically in all of the crises that were happening around the world from an economic sense. People were feeling the pinch of an inflationary crisis and stuff like
Mm.
that. And so, like, everyone, I guess if the Republicans wanted to talk about being, pro life and pro guns and, all of these usual talking points and, like, anti transgender movements or something like that, pro family values, all that sort of stuff, then the conversation should have been brought somewhere else. It should have been brought along the lines of, well, we're just going to concentrate on the cost of living and bringing inflation down and talking about real working class issues, which is what the left used to do really well.
Mm.
All they used to concentrate on was working class issues. Like, I heard someone talking the other day about like how little people talked about private health insurance in the lead up to the election.
Yeah.
Like it was almost a moot point. Like no one was talking about it. If I was a Democrat, I guess all I would have been talking about was like an issue that people care about, which is like whether or not they bring in a socialized healthcare system over there. And like speaking about points that matter to real people as opposed to like culture war issues and things
Well,
like that.
it's funny that you bring that up because I guess maybe that was a revolutionary lesson I wanted to bring up because right after the election, of course, that very point that you're talking about happens with the Luigi and the CEO from United Healthcare
Yeah.
happened. And
Yeah.
yeah, that brings us back to the communication aspect is that, well, if suddenly you are talking about work, working class issues like, hey, this United Healthcare or any of the other insurance agencies um, are just going to deny me and take my premiums and like tell me to go screw myself. Um, uh, yeah, I think it's understandable, and people are going to empathize with someone that decides to unalive someone who
Did you say
thinks,
unalive someone?
yeah,
That's hilarious.
well,
Is that the
that
rhetoric people are using?
yeah, yeah,
That's
so they
so
don't
good.
get struck out by YouTube and stuff like that.
That's great.
So, it could be a TikTok thing. I don't
Yeah,
know. I've just heard,
that's so good.
Gen Zers and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing refer to it.
Unalive.
I think it's hilarious.
It
But
is.
yeah, like just like it's a talking point you've mentioned quite a few times. Is that like sure people are going to say, "Oh, would I do that?" No, but he had nothing to lose, and he very much like it's very understandable he took the action he took.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
again, it probably brings us back to the communication stuff. That if somebody is, hey, call them a populist if you want. Like, say, uh, a younger version, a sexier version of Bernie Sanders comes out and is like, yes, we should focus on healthcare. We should focus on this. We should focus on that.
yeah, yeah,
Suddenly, maybe people might start listening to you again because
yeah.
they actually,
They care about that stuff. It affects them. It affects them
yeah,
whatever side of the political spectrum they're on. It affects them because it hits them where it hurts. And like not only where it hurts, it's not like just like something as simple as being able to go on a holiday, or it's not a luxury. Like healthcare is like, life and death kind of stuff. It's just like, oh no, I just chopped off my arm in an accident, but I can't afford to put my arm back on, so maybe I'll just live without it. Like these are like massive, massive life implications for people. So healthcare is like it's non-negotiable. It's a human right at the end of the day. Let's be honest. The UN has written it into its charter. And so, like, they're failing their obligations as a society.
mm,
The very country that houses the UN can't even like, stick to the rules that it sets. But like, there's nothing unusual about that at all. But like, yeah, I think the book itself that I read, like Hit Them Where It Hurts, it really talks about like, okay, they're not playing fair, so let's not play fair either. But what they seem to have just done was just like, okay, if they're going to talk about being pro-life, and anti-abortion, we're going to talk about like, being pro-women's rights and pro-choice and things like that. Because most people actually, like she used a statistic that like 80% of Americans, based on polling and stuff like that, actually don't give a crap about abortion. Like it's not really high on their agenda, and they think that women should just have the choice. So she was like, the nation's on our side. Let's just do that messaging. But like that, the strategic lesson there is that like if they're talking about the Republicans, that is, talking about being pro-life and anti-abortion, they're setting the conversation. And so like even if you're attacking them, they're still starting that conversation. They still got a hold of that conversation. So you don't even have to fight fire with, like, don't even go there and try and attack them on their talking points because they've already got the upper ground, you would say. Like they're in a better position and you have to kind of fight an uphill battle. But like, pick a new topic and attack them at that and get them to defend themselves against a new topic. Like I said, like with traditional left talking points, like working class issues. And so, yeah, Luigi brought that to the fore, like almost nothing we've seen in this century, in the 21st century, in this millennium. Like nothing has happened just like it in a Western sense. Like I'm sure this stuff happens all the time across the world, but I just mean like, like I said at the start, like the citadel of capitalism, like you can't take your eye off America. And like what Luigi has done, which I have described as, in anarchist terms, as propaganda by the deed.
Yeah.
And like nothing sends a message like an action. Like you can have the best propaganda poster you could ever think of. They might be very stirring and might want, make you swell up with patriotic mucus and you want to, serve and fight for your country or something like that. I'm stealing a Futurama reference there. But like that really spoke volumes. You had a pissed off, very upper middle class, like, white dude, kind of well educated, had a job, like basically had a lifestyle that most people would dream of, like, vacations, supporting loving family by the sounds of it. And like, got screwed over by the system and like saw all the anguish that it's caused, not only him, but people around him. And he decided to take matters into his own hands and he popped a CEO. And so like, the amazing thing about that event, if you want to talk about like, let's take it back to my lesson of the year, which is like we are taking a turn to the right here, but like that's not a sign that people are more right wing and like they just love right wing ideas, as much as like they just speak to people in their language and they seem to be able to mobilize their emotions and their energies. He was able to mobilize everyone's emotions and energies because, like, by all accounts, like you had a lot of right-wing commentators that were just like, this is unacceptable. You can never support violence. And like all of their regular fans are in there just like, no, he's not wrong. The insurance companies are. The health insurance industry is despicable. It's a disgusting industry. It's a plague on American society, and it needs to be dealt with. And like this galvanized the working class for the first time since, I don't know any example better than this. Like it really, like people were just like, look, killing people is not right, but like far out. This is not an easy topic to a discussion to have, because like most people agree that something needs to be done about the private health sector, and this is the type of action that it takes to have that real conversation. They're ready to have it. The people want to talk about this stuff and they want a solution. And so if Luigi's solution was just to start popping CEOs and like they get scared now, scared into submission to a certain degree to providing a better healthcare system, then like people are like, well, what's a couple of CEOs then, hey, at the end of the day? Like, if you quantify it and you think, okay, he's killed someone directly, one person, but how many people indirectly did this Brian Thompson kill with his decisions as a CEO?
Yeah, what is the quote? Kill one person, you're a murderer. Kill 3 people, you're a serial killer. Kill 1,000, you're a king. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're actually somewhere in high up the social structure, and like I think that's an incredibly insightful concept, because it is literally how it works. And there's another anarchist concept there, which is like it's hierarchies that are the big problem in society. The state is the ultimate hierarchy, and like it allows it justifies the use of violence and deadly force too. Let's be honest. Well, I think Bakunin even says in, if I'm not mistaken, in the God in the State, he's like, well, states and the bureaucracy that kind of envelop it's going to reinforce itself. It's going to perpetuate itself. So it makes sense that if you are going to rise up against it, it's going to push you down.
It's going to try and suppress you. That's right. And like hierarchies in any form, not just the state, and that's like the organization, like a massive corporation that's fully integrated with the state apparatus, providing healthcare as well throughout the system, will make decisions which literally mean life or death for thousands and thousands of people across the United States. And so, like, people were kind of not buying the right wing tune, which was like, you know, must defend capitalism kind of thing, and like, you know, killing is never acceptable. And they were like, well, this person probably killed heaps of people indirectly, so like, it's not even an eye for an eye. This is a drop in the ocean compared to the damage that they do. So like, let's rectify this. Let's have a decent conversation. And so like, I think, yeah, again, that example, that event, that propaganda by the deed has exemplified the fact that people aren't just turning to the right wing because they are full of hate and they think they're a superior race. And like, you know, they want to return to some type of conservative utopia where you have like, you know, the nuclear family and everyone's straight and they go to church on Sundays and stuff like that. It's more about the fact that they don't know what else to do, and the right wing seems to have more answers because it appeals to people's anger, which is an easy sentiment to tack onto, where like other type of solutions require a lot more planning and thought, and like they're just in the too hard basket. And so like they listen to right wing populists, but like they're not right wing to the bone. Like I said, like the people that I saw, they were talking about this from a right-wing perspective. They were getting absolutely slammed by their diehard fans in their own comment sections. They were just like, no, you are out of touch. You don't understand this. Luigi is right. Like, at the end of the day, yes, killing is wrong. And I don't really condone violence, but like, you know, what he's done needed to be done kind of thing. And it's just like, far out. If you can galvanize the working class, like, there is hope for us. Like, I really, up until that point, as much as I would have wanted to fight against all odds to unify the working class, I would have really thought that it was almost an impossible feat. But like after that, like there is still issues that unite the broad masses in society. You just have to find them.
Yeah, but like it goes back to the cost of living that you were saying before, because the thing though is that like, let's take even here in Australia, in terms of a cost of living crisis, and let's tackle healthcare. You know, roll things back, like say pre-COVID, for example. You know, it was I'm pretty sure it was Joe Hockey and Dutton that were trying to establish co-payments here with our Medicare, where you would actually have to go if you went to the GP, instead of bulk billing and, you know, things being free when you went to the GP. When you went to the GP, they were trying to institute stuff where you would have to do a copay of $30. And like people like, stuff that the Medicare works. Like, why would I pay for something that's free? But roll it forward to 2024 and now in 2025, if you go to the GP, it's basically a copayment. Like, don't get me wrong, like Medicare does offset some of the stuff, but not all of it anymore. Because, you know, these sort of institutions that were, you know, that were started, or at least started in the 1970s and 1980s, they're slowly being rolled back. You know, social democracy is not the same way it was before. And it's totally understandable that people are looking for easy answers or easy more straightforward messaging. That like, hey, if you trust in this strong man, you'll get exactly like it is in the good old days. But that's just living on borrowed time. Because
it's not even a band-aid solution, because like they're not actually solving anything. They're just whipping up people's anger, and then they vote for them and nothing happens. So like, it's not even a band-aid solution. Like, oh, let's just pump a bit of money into this and like everyone will be happy for a little bit. No, they're not even doing that. Like, they're just, those type of people accelerate the destruction of the social welfare state. And so like, I was thinking about this idea before that like, at a certain extent, capitalism, in order to ensure that it is able to reproduce itself. So not just in the sense of like allowing there to be an accumulation of capital in order to reproduce itself, because like profit is derived from surplus value, and the only way to get surplus value legitimately is obviously to exchange money for labor power, and labor power does that magical thing where it creates value that was never there before. In order to have the labor power in the system, you need to concentrate on your social production, and capitalism really ignores its social production, unlike other systems. And so like one of the biggest components of social production in like Western liberal societies, like I said, since World War II, has been the social welfare state, a social safety net. So like even if you like fell through the gaps of capitalism and you weren't able to get a job and sustain your own self and like maybe your own health and stuff like that, like you could get public housing, maybe you could at least live somewhere, you could like I guess get like go on the dole or get some type of social welfare payment so you could scrape a living somehow. And like if anything happened, like at least there was a public healthcare system, or at least a medical system that would look after you until you were healthy enough to then reinstitute yourself in society and get a job and being a functioning, citizen again and all that sort of stuff. And so like modern capitalism needs the social welfare state in order to exist. Because like once the social welfare state is kind of like eroded to a certain extent and people start falling through the cracks, not only is it going to make them angry, but it's also going to mean that they can't sustain their populations, can't sustain themselves any longer. And then you'll have a labor shortage and labor crises, which then, obviously impacts capitalism and its profits again, because then the cost of labor goes up. And like really like the biggest solution to, profits for a long time has just been, suppressing wages or like just cutting out massive sections of the workforce anyway. So if you don't have large sections of the workforce and a good industrial reserve army, as Marx would talk about, labor costs go up and then profits dwindle. So like, there's your capitalism is full of contradictions and will eventually end itself, like that downward spiral that it's going through, compounding and compounding. But like the social welfare state has kept capitalism alive and prosperous for a long time. And so like people are feeling the burn of the degradation of the social welfare state. And without it, like people are angry and they're turning right to look for quick solutions. But without it, I feel like capitalism may have some very, very huge crises or like events that it won't be able to recover from properly. Like it won't be able to, like in the Western sense anyway, it won't be able to come to life or produce value in the same way ever again. And it may well be like we are going to be turning to kind of like a, industrial revolution type era again in terms of our inequality levels and the divide between rich and poor and like the standards of living between different people. We're going to go back to having a very distinct class system as well. And like it would seem that in the modern age, like you have to really kind of regulate, like in the 21st century, that is, you're going to have to regulate capitalism in a way that is more akin to what the Chinese are doing, as opposed to what I guess the free market Western societies are doing, where they're kind of allowing there to be more like, I guess, corporate control of the economy, where the Chinese have more state-owned enterprise control of the economy. So they work as under market principles, but like at the end of the day, if that doesn't suit the plan for China and the vision that China has for its economy, then the market is subordinate to that vision and that plan. So
do you reckon we're heading for a second Gilded Age?
We're already there, I would say. We've just got more flashy stuff nowadays. So people have got TVs and cars, where the working class didn't have that before. They were lucky, to have any luxuries. So like now we have those luxuries, but before we didn't have like credit systems and financial systems like we do now. So like most people might have nice luxury items, but like they're living on credit.
Yeah.
You know, they don't own their house. They probably don't own their car. It's probably on finance. And most of the stuff in their house is probably delivered to them via like Afterpay or some service like that. And so like they're living on borrowed money. They're not living
on
off
borrowed time. Yeah.
on borrowed time. And so like I feel like if you're going to keep capitalism alive without the social welfare state, you're going to have to start planning stuff in the economy to a certain extent, because capitalism is going to basically it's going to destroy its labor force in the Western world anyway. And like people are feeling the burn of that at the moment. That's why everyone's so disgruntled. And that's why like governments are basically come to a standstill like across the world. Like look at the European situation at the moment. Look what's happening in France. Like their government is basically ineffective. Like the president there is of one party. The people that are the prime minister and all of the people that are in the government are like so like there's so many different parties in there. Like they can't form governments. Probably they can't do anything. Germany, same thing. Like these are the two biggest economies in continental Europe, and they're completely screwed. Like the UK is like it's cut itself off from the rest of the Europeans by Brexit, and like it's kind of just wandering in no man's land at the moment. So UK is almost out of the picture entirely in terms of its economic prowess, apart from the fact that it has like London, which is like a financial hub. It's literally got no economy. So they're basically screwed. And like the Americans, just because they're self-sufficient, you know, that's fine. They might be able to look after themselves for the foreseeable future, but like their governmental structures are basically ineffective at the moment. Trump has been able to wrangle up enough support throughout like Congress and with his own win in order to get some coordination going from a Republican sense. But like, what does that mean? Like, what is he actually going to do for the economy? Time will tell.
Well, you know, they shut down for the holiday season because you don't have to worry about the government.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which is, it's interesting. But like, you know, it's...
Sorry, I need to look, like, I need to fact check that. Was that like all a massive joke, or did that actually happen?
No, I think that's true, because I think I've heard that talked about in previous years and stuff like that, where a lot of government services kind of just shut down for the holidays.
Wait, that's an American thing?
I think so. Like it's very skeleton. Like it's not unusual for like government departments to go down to very few services over certain periods, like shutdown periods and stuff like that. But like I think the Americans, it's kind of like everything, like from federal to state to, or maybe I don't know about local. But like, yeah, the federal bureaucracy pretty much shuts down for a certain period and stuff like that. So it's, very hard to get things moving for the Christmas break. But like, you know, whatever, that's a cultural thing, I guess you would say. But like the governmental system in the West, Western democracy, is failing. It's like barely scraping by at the moment. Like you could barely call it functional. Liberal democracies, as we know, have basically died. And like people are living in this fantasy that like, you know, we'll get to some balance again. But like, I would question that. Like people have absolutely no faith in governmental structures anymore, from years of neoliberal policies and the degradation of the social welfare state. And so they have no, like they used to have a safety net, and now they have nothing. And they don't have any investment because all of the countries around the world are in enormous debt. And to debt to who? Like foreign companies and other countries that are also in debt. So everyone just lives in this like weird global debt trap. And so like there's no way out. There's no way out of this situation at all.
Well, unless you do, as David Graeber would say, you do like a cataclysmic debt forgiveness thing.
Yeah, give me debt jubilee for days for us. Give it to me. Give it to me for days. Like, could you imagine, like, you know, talking about what would like revolutionize the world economy overnight? Like, if every country was just like, all right, tomorrow, no one owes anyone anything, that kind of thing, and like everyone just started at scratch and no country owed any country any money anymore, and all debts were forgiven. And like people actually started being able to invest in infrastructure, because that's like another thing that's missing from the modern state in the 21st century is like after World War II in Europe, because they had to rebuild, and in America, like North America, obviously, they did like massive infrastructure projects. Like
Yes.
infrastructure is like the capitalist like foundational element. If the state is important to capitalism, which it is, there really is like no such thing as a free market. Like infrastructure is just the bee's knees. Like it's just this the core that everything is built around. And like the Chinese know this and do this so much better than like everyone else. Like all they do is build infrastructure. They're just like, oh crap, what do we do next? And they're just like, I don't know, build another bullet train. All right, let's do this. Like kind of thing. And they're just like, well, what do we do now? It's like, oh, I don't know, build a city somewhere. And like when they reached the limits of what they could do in China, they were just like, fine, let's just start building infrastructure everywhere else. Like you get a port. And you get a highway.
I'll just do a new Belt and Road initiative.
Yeah, exactly.
If I must.
If I must. And then just like you get a railway line and you get and they're just going around the world building infrastructure, and everyone's just like, they're just setting up an empire. And it's just like, well, yeah, they could potentially be doing that. But they're investing, like you got to think about like capital and how capitalism works. Like capital, has to constantly be in motion for the system to work. It cannot sit idle. Idle capital is like the cardinal sin of the capitalist. Like you must get a return on your investment. And like if the Chinese have capital that's sitting around at home, then go and spend it somewhere else. And like this is what the colonial imperialists used to do. The English, the French, the Prussians, the Russians, the Japanese, instead, what they used to do was just go and eradicate a population somewhere, bring in their own people or enslave the population, and then start building capital and infrastructure there so they could trade with them and keep their economies going at home. The Chinese are like, well, let's just do that without the killing of the local populations part. So like, okay, maybe they're setting up an imperial network, but they're doing it without like going around just wiping out local populations and subjugating them. Okay, they might be building ports and rail infrastructure and, helping countries develop. But like, they're not doing that at the end of a gun. They're doing that by negotiating and financing projects and things like that. And so like, that's what China's doing. And like, you know what? That makes the capital go around. So like if they invest in a port somewhere or they invest in a railway line somewhere else and help bring that to the people, then like what happens is when that rail or that port infrastructure needs to be replaced, that country goes back to China and buys more stuff off China, and then the capital circulates, and it circulates in that country and it circulates back in China. And so like, if anything, what the West should be learning, liberal democracy should be learning from this, if you want to reinvigorate your economy, like don't attack the social welfare system, get yourselves out of this debt mindset, which you're very critical of, Forias, I know, which is like a country is not run like a household budget. You don't need to get it into black. You should be investing in stuff. All Western countries should be pouring as much money as they can into building infrastructure. They should be building ports, railways, highways, building new like energy plants, like whatever it is, just invest in infrastructure and like the money will come.
Well, yeah, because if your debt is just to give tax breaks to the richest 1%, then sure, that's a bloody stupid way of using your debt. But if it is to build the new snowy mountain scheme, just to use another Australian example, or it is used to invest, because like I guess what you're also alluding to as well is that going back to historical materialism, the most successful civilizations, whatever the productive mode was, kept on perpetuating the forces behind that productive mode.
Yes.
So that was slavery. Yes. The Romans were going out and conquering somewhere to bring back slaves.
Yes.
So they can reinstitute their slavery mode of production.
Yes.
If it was the feudal age, if you were the landlord, or I should say feudal lords, if you had a lot of land for your serfs to work through, then the productive mode was reproducing itself.
Yes.
With capitalism, if your capital is dead in the water, you are screwed.
You're screwed. Yeah, you're a lame duck. And you're not producing any capacity. And like the illusion is in this, people call it the financial stage of capitalism or something. The illusion is in the financial world that money's still circulating and things are happening, but that's all just speculation. It's just like gambling. It's just people have kind of these ideas about what things are worth, and they trade on ideas and concepts. There's nothing tangible. There's no real value there. In the capitalist system, the value has to come from somewhere. The real value has to come from somewhere. And infrastructure projects have been the way that countries have, one, developed themselves, and two, provided the means, the economic driving force to give everyone enough wealth so they can consume. And that's what capitalism needs. It needs people consuming. And so if you're constantly undermining a large consumer class in your population, hey, it might be nice to have a group of affluent people that kind of can afford lots of nice things, but they're a small group. And so if you had a larger section of consuming class with more disposable income, the system would work better. But you need to give them that by kickstarting the system somehow. And that really comes down to infrastructure. An Australian example I think of is the NBN. Imagine if we didn't have the politicians that had the foresight to bring in the NBN when they did. Australia would literally be, by modern standards, in the Stone Age. We are already in the Stone Age, but at least we're in the digital Stone Age. We could have been without that. Our internet speed here or infrastructure here is 50th in the world, under third world countries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I did hear that statistic.
Yeah, and that's mental to think about, that an affluent, liberal democratic society has such poor internet infrastructure or communications infrastructure. And if you really wanted to ensure Australia's future in the world economy and stuff like that, because we generally have an economy that's based on there's some productive elements to it, but usually where we have a large educated sector that provides kind of that knowledge base, a managerial class and a class of people that are educated and provide services and things like that. But they need digital infrastructure to do that. And so if we just spent, again, billions of dollars upgrading our telecommunications infrastructure across the entire continent, then we'd be setting ourselves up for 10 or 20 years in the future to have massive wealth returns. And maybe we would pay down some of those debts that everyone's so scared of and stuff like that. But you have to have foresight, you have to have vision for that, right? And a liberal democratic society doesn't have that built into it, because in the modern game, it's just about winning the next election. Yeah. And the next election is only in 4 years' time. And so if you've got a plan for 10 years, who gives a shit about that plan for 10 years? Because you just want to win the next election. And 100 years ago, politicians had more integrity than that. They were no, we want to strengthen our nation and ensure our future. And so they did, even if they didn't win the next election, they still did projects that would increase the value of the nation. And the liberal democratic system at the moment, like I said, it's decrepit, it's dying, it's on its knees at the moment, and there is no investment in the future. There really is no broad vision for massive infrastructure projects that would one day change the face of this country, and ensure its affluence, ensure its prosperity moving into the future. But like I said before, a system that melds that market element with planning, would be doing that.
Look, this has just popped into my mind, but when conservatives talk about small government, I know they talk about downsizing, etc., but I wonder if the sort of mindset that we have about, looking towards the next election, the politician mindset, let's just notch on the bedpost our wins and then make a few promises and that sort of thing, and hopefully they come true, et cetera, et cetera. Back to the point, like, are we living in the spirit of small government where like they're just thinking about the next election, and because all of these programs are being rolled back, and you know the thinking is incredibly short term, we might as well be a small government.
We might as well, yeah, because it's not like they are, like I said, having a vision. Like a government, you would think in a liberal democratic sense, is there to support the market, to make sure basically the economy is working, because a happy economy means a happy people, happy, like all that type of stuff. But like if they have no vision to do what they need to provide like I said, the skeleton, the core of what a capitalist economy in the 21st century needs in order to survive and be prosperous, if they're not even doing that because all they can care about is like the next 4 years, where really you should be planning for the next 10 or the next 20, then like, yeah, it might as well be a small government. Because like the big argument that comes from the conservatives and like libertarian types, I guess you would say, for small government is just like, it's more like a cost-saving exercise. It's just like, why tax people so much kind of thing and take away their resources because, they worked hard for their money and stuff like that. So, like, they shouldn't have to pay anything. It's theirs. It's their private property, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, you just cut everyone's taxes and have as small government as you can and really just do the necessities like, defense and things like that. And so, like, it's just a cost-saving exercise. There's no vision in that. There's really no vision in that at all. They're just like, government's inefficient. It's just a big bureaucracy full of red tape. And so just cut it all out and your problems will be solved. I don't think that's the answer. I really don't think that's the answer at all. Modern capitalism, as we know it, cannot survive without the state. That's what the state and revolution is all about.
And to be completely honest, like, I'm just glad you said that, because this, I guess, a talk of conservatives are all about small government, and like this, because like take even the concept like the original tax cuts that were happening in Australia, where like everything was basically going to the super wealthy and nobody else was getting them. Yeah. And then Labor's at least made it, there's some semblance where it's some of the tax brackets are getting the tax cut. Like, if you just funnel everything in terms of a tax cut to the ultra wealthy, therefore making the government less efficient, then you're decreasing your investment in the government. That won't be there anymore, so you won't be able to continue to perpetuate those sort of advantages for yourself.
Yes, it's self-defeating.
Yeah.
It's completely self-defeating. And that's why, like, yeah, small government, I think, works in theory in the sense that, like, okay, if you didn't have any regulation at all and you had, like, a proper free market, like, kind of thing, like, yeah, okay, you probably could get away with that to a certain extent. Like, there might be private sectors and like private companies that come in and fill all the gaps where the government used to be and stuff like that, but you'd have to have it like really unregulated. But like the type of companies and type of people that want small government are also the types of companies that want regulation that comes in their favor. So like, laws and tariffs and like trade relations that benefit their company over their competitors. And they're also the types of people that want subsidies from the government and spending from the government in their favor. Like that example of, I think it was an Adani coal mine that was really controversial like 5 or 10 years ago. Like no one in Australia wanted this coal mine to go ahead because of the environmental implications of it. And like part of the deal with Adani, because it was going to create like, I don't know, 1,000 jobs or something minuscule like that, was that the Australian government was going to front the bill to pay for the rail infrastructure from the mine to the coastline so they could get the coal off to some other part of the world that wasn't even going to be used by Australia anyway. And so like the Australian government was going to pay to attract them over to exploit our resources, was going to pay to allow, like to pay to build the infrastructure required just so they could have a private railway line that was funded by the Australian taxpayer.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is a very typical Mariana Mazzucato talking point, because I very clearly remember in The Value of Everything, she was basically like, the rise of such companies like Tesla and that sort of thing. There was a similar company, I completely forget the name of the company, but it was like Tesla, where the American government said like, hey, if you do well, all you have to do is pay us back the loan, and then you can go on your merry way. But if your company fails, then we'll foot the bill. And the funny thing is that like, okay, yeah, they back these companies, and then these companies make billions and billions and billions of dollars, and like the loan that they initially gave was next to nothing.
Yeah.
Like, if you were thinking ahead, down the track, you could be like, okay, if we'll foot the bill if you do go under, but like if you become uber wealthy from this startup idea, give us shares in this company, like give us royalties. So I don't know, maybe we could use it for a sovereign wealth fund.
Yes,
like that's thinking ahead, like you're saying. But also back to the original point, like your Teslas or your really important companies, they would not be standing if it wasn't for the government.
The state. They rely on it heavily. And so like this idea of small government is like a petty bourgeois fantasy. It's the actual people that are in this like weird middle class of like business owners, like small to medium business owners and stuff, that probably need assistance from the government, but they just see themselves getting taxed and taxed more than the super wealthy. And so like they're upset with the system. And so their solution is just like, well, cut all government spending. We don't need it anyway. We can do it. We're the business sector. And so like they kind of voice this fantasy that then trickles throughout like other parts of society. And so people call for small government, and maybe they're right from their perspective. But like the real heavyweights of capitalism, they love government. They want the state support, and they kind of need the state support to survive. Like, look at the banking sector, for instance. Like whenever they gamble with an entire global economy and bring it to its knees, what happens? Like Obama gets the checkbook out and he's just like, so what do you want? How many trillion do you need? That kind of thing. And like the American people are just like, but like thousands of us are homeless now. What about us? Where's that check? And he's like, no. We need to support the financial system. The banking system is more important than the citizens, like kind of thing. And so like the state supports capitalism. And so like this idea of small government is complete fantasy. Like it's just complete fantasy in the 21st century environment, I think. Like you can't, in the modern world, you cannot honestly live with this opinion that like capitalism can continue as it is in a global manner. Like we're not living in the 1800s anymore. We are living now in the 21st century. Global capitalism cannot sustain itself on small government anymore. If anything, what I'm arguing now is that liberal democratic societies are failing because of like the life cycles that they go through. The social welfare state has been completely degraded, so no one has faith in them anymore. And because they can't plan for anything, or they have no vision, like they can't provide for their own citizens. And so like really, the only thing to do is to start planning and like going back to, bricks and mortar, like the kind of original bare bones of capitalism. Like that's how capitalism was forged and like really took off in the industrial era. Like they were building railway lines like they were going out of fashion. Like they were just building infrastructure everywhere to move capital and goods around, and like value and wealth was flying everywhere, and it was unregulated. And so you had this like the Gilded Age going on, and like, robber barons and people taking all of this stuff and eating their competition and claiming everything in their own. And then the government came and broke up cartels and put in antitrust laws and like changed the game and regulated capitalism and divided it up and divvied up some of the wealth. So it wasn't just going to the top end of town and people spread it out, and like they were like, fair enough. And then like society and living standards increased, and like wealth was shared around a little bit more, and capitalism did really well again. And they went through this golden age in the middle of the 20th century. And we've come off that peak now, and we are sliding. If we're not in the trough yet, we're sliding down at lightning pace. And the question is, have we hit rock bottom yet? And like, I would say no for IS. I would say we've probably got lower to sink. And it's a dark revolutionary lesson, but you asked for revolutionary lessons. And like, I don't think we've hit the bottom yet. I think we've got more in us. I think society is going, like Western liberal societies are going to degrade more. But the only silver lining to that is like that will push people more and more towards positions where they will be more receptive to revolutionary alternatives, let's say.
Yeah, that's probably a good point to end that section on. But I guess if that section was a bit depressing, let's go to something a little bit more upbeat. What are your goals for 2025?
Goals for 2025 is a good one for IS. Well, like I'm not sure if you are aware. I think you are, but like I'm actually going to be demasking in 2025. So,
oh, okay.
I will be, just for the listeners to actually get through to the end part of these podcasts. If you see me, in a few podcast time, and you're like, "Where'd the mask guy go?" It's still me. And you will see my face for the first time. So if you're a YouTube viewer, you will be able to see that. So like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reveal my face. I am going to become a faced Mystere in 2025. And I'm going to be working, I think, on a lot more live stream content and try to develop the movement that way. So that is my mission for 2025. I will come back and watch this episode in a year's time and see if I stay true to my word for us. And yourself?
Okay. Actually, I think my goal for 2025 would probably be to actually nut out the 4IS. Because now, instead of innovation being as part of the 4Is, it was that stream, I think it was like a month and a half ago, where we were talking about incentivization, and I was like, no, I think the 4Is now are integrity, incentivization, inequity, insanity. I think that works as well, and I think just keeping it as capitalism, because it doesn't differentiate between market capitalism nor state capitalism.
Yes.
It has that sort of flexibility. You could do a proper analysis of how the productive mode of capital re-perpetuates itself into the 4AS, and it keeps on going, and it keeps on going, and keeps on going.
So interesting. I think it's got more of an umbrella approach to it, which encapsulates, so incentivization would encapsulate the innovation, because the innovation can be an incentive, but it's not limiting either.
Yes, and because I think innovation is too narrow, whereas incentivization is, like, for example, you could have something that is a planned economy, but it could be a planned economy that basically puts down its workers in order to,
fulfill its objectives.
Fulfill its objectives. But I'm going to save all of that discussion for because I want to do a 0.5 series with you and Kareem to actually see what you guys think about it, and we can actually properly flesh it out.
Interesting.
But that's my goal of 2025. Do you have any more?
Well, I do want to spend a bit of time digesting, what's the word? Marx's fundamentals. So, I was gifted a book, The Grundrisse,
Ooh.
by Karl Marx, which is basically the notebook that he wrote preceding Capital, Das Kapital.
Mm.
And it's a lot more philosophical than text, like technical in its language and its vision. Like he was rather influenced by Hegel, and
Yeah.
I think he considered himself a Hegelian to a certain extent. Um, and like, yeah, so it's his philosophical and kind of first draft of Capital, and I think it's got some raw emotion in it and some raw detail in it that will give some incredible insights to understanding capitalism better. Because
Yeah.
like what Capital does is it explains capital, I think, pretty well, but like it does it from an 1850s perspective. Whereas like the Grundrisse is just like kind of the philosophical ideas behind that, as opposed to like nutting out like actual facts and figures from the 1850s and things like that. And
Mm.
so it's like the ideas behind capital without the historical context. So like maybe I'm thinking it will give you these kind of salient features that broadly adapt or are systematic of capitalism at any stage of its development and will help you understand where you are at a certain snapshot in history. And so, like, I'm really excited to read that actually, and get an understanding or get an insight into like Marx's understanding of the world under a capitalist mode of production. Because I just don't think anyone really has tried to grapple with capitalism as a totality like
Yeah.
Marx has. And so, like, just understanding that framework, just or like trying to get your head around that framework, just gives you insights that are just so incredibly invaluable for AS. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And so, like, I really want to grapple with that and take my time with it and understand as much as possible because all of those lessons can be like applied some way to the 21st century and understanding where we're at the moment. And that's what I really want to do, is understand like how we have gotten to this point, and like from that you can then see a way out. You can see a way out.
Well, would you say that that could be a perpetual goal, as in tackling a seminal work? Because
Mm.
I know somebody gifted me The Wealth of Nations that I've still got to tackle.
Ah, interesting.
So like, and that's what, 6 books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like, would you say that could be a good perpetual goal for you, like tackling a seminal
Yeah,
text?
yeah, I think it would be. I definitely think it would be. Because like they're foundational documents, and like they've set up kind of like a framework and an understanding of the world that like kind of pervades or is rather pervasive throughout time periods. And so like yeah, Wealth of Nations would be good because it would be great to read that in its entirety as opposed to like snippets here and there, which is what I've done. And like just stick it in the face of conservatives and libertarians and stuff when they misquote Adam Smith, because I think he's one of the most misquoted and misunderstood economists of the modern age, because everyone uses him like libertarians and conservatives use him as like I don't know, their go-to justify the free market system, which is not what Adam Smith was doing at all. He was kind of justifying what a decent free market society would do, and was highly critical of the way that things were looking like and had turned out in his time. So, yeah, I'd love to read that as well, just so you could be like in those conversations, be like, well, no, actually, that's not
Well,
what he thought out.
you've heard me say this before, but when a right winger pipes up about Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations,
Mm.
you shove a theory of moral sentiments in their face.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, it's like,
yeah.
yes, he did talk about self-interest, but then
Mm.
he had an equal seminal text about
Mm.
how own interest and other interests are really important,
Yeah, yeah,
and you
yeah.
should go read that.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just about the self. The self is part of a broader ecosystem. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I know. He's such a socialist, Adam Smith, actually. Yeah.
And look, that was some good goals moving forwards, and I think that ended up being a really good discussion. And with
Hmm.
that, we'll move on to our final segment, which is what's that synthwave art? So,
Yeah, what the hell
Mystery.
is that? Is that like G.I. Joe or something like that? Like, who is this all-American hero that's standing in front of, like, it looks like some scene from Independence Day or something like that when it's just before, like, the alien mothership blows up the White House and everyone's, no, it's just after and everyone's kind of running away and leaving their cars. But this
Okay,
guy's
you're
here
gonna
to save the day.
okay, you're gonna like this mystery. What I said was the prompt was leading the revolution and overcoming past mistakes to reach a true socialist. Leading the revolution and overcoming past mistakes to reach a true socialist movement for all the workers.
Wow. Okay, so that's all the
And
workers in the background. I can see flags and stuff. But he's got a commie star and an American flag.
yes, is that a prediction? Good old AI.
Yeah, I bloody hope so. Eh? About time AI, you started actually predicting stuff, not just creating beautiful artwork. Eh?
Okay, and with that, remember everyone to keep thinking and keep learning. And I'll pass it off to you, Mystery.
Thank you very much, 4IS, and to all of you out there. Please remember, you know the score. Give us a like, give it a comment, subscribe for more. Make sure you hit that notification bell. And until next time, I am, you are, we are a mystery.